Thank you, Dimitris, and everybody organizing this round table, which is really touching. So thank you, Salvatore, Emma, IHS. And I have to say that I'm a bit concerned after these insightful talks. I am a bit concerned about my contribution because I never had the opportunity to know in deep Vit Klemes. I just exchanged a few words with him in Perugia, and I just met him once, and I was also very shy because he was a very important person for me. So I cannot say that I knew him very well. So I will try to speak about my feelings on him that I got by reading his papers that were, for me, some of them were really very much inspiring. So I will try to provide a perspective from the person that gained a very deep admiration for him. And let me start by the opportunity that I had to meet him. It was his lecture in Perugia, which was really touching because it was clear for everybody that he already got his reservation on Cloud 17, and he was conscious of the fact that probably it was his last talk to the international community. In fact, it was not, because he had another opportunity to talk in Prague in 2008, but it was like a farewell talk. And I think it was really very much inspiring. It was a talk with a lot of sense of humor. And I'm quoting here what Arthur Eskew in the tribute that IHS dedicated to Vit Klemes, the web tribute, wrote. And he considers that the talk given by Vit in Perugia was one of his best. And for what I can say, I really agree. It was simple, witty, and profound in its challenge to the practicing engineer and scientist. And I can confirm that it was really very much inspiring. Let me talk now of some of his contribution. Dimitris talked about the Earth phenomenon. I will concentrate my attention on the contribution that he gave on reservoir management and validation of hydrological models. I will start with the latter. In 1986, he published in the Hydrological Sciences Journal a masterpiece paper on model validation that is still valid today. He proposed a hierarchical approach for validating hydrological models, starting from the split sample technique, which we well know now. And I think it's relevant to quote a sentence from the abstract. He says, "The scheme contains no new and original ideas. It is merely an attempt to present an organized methodology based on standard techniques." So you can see already some sense of humor and some criticism. He was convinced that what he proposed was not original at all. It was just the reluctance of hydrologists to validate their models that kept these ideas hidden so far. And in fact, later on, after 20 years, again from the web tribute to him, Vazken Andreassian and Charles Perrin reported his comment on the subject. He says that the test that he had suggested will be avoided under whatever excuses, because modelers, especially those who want to market their products, know only too well that they wouldn't not pass it. I had no illusion in this regard when I wrote my paper, but the logic of modeling led me to develop the testing principle to its, let's say, theoretical limit. And this already shows his attitude, his provocative attitude. But indeed, I think this is really inspiring on the current modern science and some mispractice that he wanted to highlight. And this is even more evident if we turn to reservoir management. First of all, let's say that he was also a brilliant engineer, as Henny already pointed out, and therefore reservoir management was a relevant engineering problem for him. And first of all, let me mention that he translated in English selected contribution from the Russian literature, published from 1930 to 1940, And he was able to notice that this contribution anticipated scientific developments that were presented by the English literature some 10, 30 years later. And one may be amazed by his linguistic skills, because he was born in Czechoslovakia, and then he translated this paper from Russian to English, and he provided an explanation for his attitude and the inspiration to learn several languages. In this paper aside, he writes, and so, having acquired after 1945 an ability to read Russian and the privilege after 1968 to write in English, parenthesis, for the former I'm obliged, so to speak, to Joseph Stalin, and for the latter to Leonid Brezhnev. I think this is great. This is really clarifying what type of man he was. It's really, and I highly suggest to read some of his papers. It's a continuous inspiration. And basically, it's interesting to note that he proved that the result on reservoir management obtained by linear programming and dynamic programming that were a very popular research activity in the 60s could also be obtained, and more efficiently, by using storage mass curve analysis that was introduced by Ripple 1 century before. And therefore, I think it's interesting to see how he criticized the modern, by that time in the 70s, scientific attitude according to which previously simple concepts are now blurred by the use of potential language and largely ornamental mathematics. This was written in the 70s, so it's really something that I think is still very actual. And this is longer, but I think it's interesting to read, because it's really, I would say, a lot of fun. In particular, it will be shown that after more than a decade of concentrated effort by an army of high-caliber researchers, and after volumes of dissertation piled high and deep, swollen with jargons of Hegelian obscurity, and bursting with the frightening overkill of equations that have exhausted several times over the notational capacity of 2 alphabets, and caused breakdown of many a computer, then he concludes there is basically nothing new than what Ripple suggested in 1883. Of course, he was maybe excessively critical, but I think this is really something inspiring, and it's published in his WRR paper of 1979. He had clearly a vigorous sense of humor. And another citation that I would like to make is again from Vazken and Charles' tribute to him. And they say that in his paper 1988 entitled Hydrological Perspective, they say it's a masterpiece, and there he adapted the hydrology, the radio Yerevan riddles used in the former Soviet Union as a way to criticize the inner contradiction of the Soviet system. He used their stereotypic format, which always starts with an inquiry to Radio Yerevan and continue with an answer, starting with in principle yes, but at the end they deconstruct the affirmative meaning. And it's interesting to see the application to hydrology. The question is, it's true that hydrologists are the scientists who study the relationship within the water cycle, and the answer is, in principle, yes, but they are not scientists, they are technologists, and they don't study them, they fudge them. And what I really noticed that he was really successful in accompanying the provocative tone with the sense of humor. And I think this is a distinguishing feature, because in doing so, he resulted in very effective provocations. Let me also mention that he was, again, a brilliant engineer. And also, he was awarded, I think you forgot to mention this award, the Vantage Show Award from the American Society of Civil Engineering in 1988. And I think it's also relevant to see that as an engineer he was also awarded. And my feeling is that he was one of the best interpreters of hydrology as a science on its own, but he never forgot the role of hydrology in engineering application, as Dimitris highlighted. And I think that his papers are still a very relevant reading, and I would suggest to young people once in a while to read historical masterpieces, because this is a very inspiring activity, and in my opinion, Vit's papers are a very useful reading. And if I had to say in a few words the lessons that I learned from him, probably is a well-known lesson, but I learned that we should not make simple problems more complicated than they are. We shouldn't use complicated solutions to solve simple problems. It seems like a very trivial assertion, but I think, especially still in modern science, we have to take it into account. This is all what I can say, but I'm very grateful to you for inviting me, because I'm very much honored to have had this opportunity to say what is my feeling about Vit Klemes.